during the Milan Cortina Olympics just gone, and I'm sitting in a commentary booth with Steve Bradbury. It was the anniversary of his famous gold medal win, where everyone fell in front of him and he's come across and won gold, the first Winter Olympic gold for Australia. And we're just sitting there having a drink, having a chat. And that made me realise, wow, I was the kid watching him and thinking, I'd love to work in media one day and cover that and be a part of that. And here I am sitting next to him, and it was just that to me was a pinch me moment. That was where I go, wow, look how far I've come.
Hello and welcome to the SportsGrad podcast, the ultimate guide to making it in the sports industry. I'm Ruben Williams, founder of SportsGrad, and on this podcast we chat to industry professionals to find out exactly how they got hired into dream jobs in sport. If you want to know what people are really doing to break in and grow their careers, make sure you follow the pod and subscribe to our newsletter for even more advice. Or if you want to give yourself a competitive advantage in the job market and put your career on a rapid new trajectory, head to our website and apply for a place in the SportsGrad Method Program. We can take care of all of that for you. Now, coming up on the show today is Andrew Hawkins, the researcher whose work sits behind some of the biggest broadcasts on the planet. When you watch the Olympics, the Paralympics, or the Commonwealth Games, everything the commentators say on air has to be rock solid, tell a story, and even entertain. And Andrew is one of the people who makes sure it does. As a senior researcher, he builds the background, context, and accuracy that live coverage runs on. He's currently doing this for the 7 Network for their coverage of the Glasgow 2026 Commonwealth Games. And previously, he did it across Nine's coverage of Paris 2024, as well as Milano Cortina 2026, where he led the Paralympic research. But Andrew didn't start in the Olympic movement. In fact, he built his name in international horse racing, spending 5 years based in Hong Kong and reporting across Australia, Europe, Asia, Africa, and North America. From the South China Morning Post to the Hong Kong Jockey Club to presenting international racing on television, he earned global recognition, including being awarded International Racing Expert of the Year. Today, he's taken the same discipline and preparation and applied it to everywhere from major sporting events to elections. Andrew's story is proof that the skills you sharpen in one corner of sport can carry you to the biggest stages in the world, and that amazing careers in sport can exist behind the broadcast lens. If you're looking to understand how a background in journalism can take your career around the world, you're going to love this chat. Grab a pen and enjoy this conversation with Andrew Hawkins. Andrew Hawkins, welcome to the SportsGrad podcast.
Oh, it's great to be here, Ruben. I've listened so many times. It seems quite surreal, really.
Well, you're another member of the group of people who have completed the circle of Grad, whereby they start off as a follower on LinkedIn or Instagram, then become a member, and then land a place in the industry, and then eventually come back as a guest on the podcast. So congratulations to you on that. I'm really excited to kind of tell your story and hear some of the different parts that led to where you are now with 7. But before we jump into that, we caught up recently because we both found ourselves in Seattle at the Men's FIFA World Cup. And you are a sports-loving purist and made a bit of a mission trip out to Seattle for not too long. Can you tell us a bit about your trip to Seattle?
Yeah, look, it's one of those things. I'd always wanted to experience a World Cup. I'd seen friends go before. I'd never had the timing quite work out, whether it was that I was doing other work or I was living abroad, or just that the timing had never worked. And suddenly there was an opportunity to go to the US and actually experience a World Cup. I think for a lot of people who I'd spoken to, it was always about going and experience the European World Cup because that's the purest of the pure. But being there in the US and getting to see Australia take on the US, it was phenomenal. And so as soon as I was able to get tickets sorted out, it was just I had to be there. There was no second where I really questioned that decision. And even as it came closer, and I had other work to do and things like that, but I just thought, look, it's 4 days, which I ended up going for 4 days. And it was the best decision I've made. As a sporting fan, there is nothing quite like the World Cup. I've been to many big events around the world, but it was just the experience was something that you can't really summarize. You can see all the pictures, you can see all the vision, but until you're actually there, it's extraordinary. And I was telling someone the other day, just being in a foreign city and being surrounded by so many people, so many Australians, so many people of your country, that was surreal in itself. Look, the result didn't go our way, but that's okay. It was still an incredible experience. And I think even just flying through LA, because I flew through LA to get up to Seattle, and just seeing, I think I counted 14 or 15 different jerseys. And the one that stands out to me was a big group of people from Uzbekistan who were flying to Mexico City to see them play Colombia. I mean, where else in the world would you be able to spot a group of people and go, yeah, you're from Uzbekistan? It was phenomenal. And I'm already counting down the days until Spain, Portugal, and Morocco in 2030.
You're right. There's nothing quite like it. And some people might think, "What? You spent all that money on a 4-day trip?" But you don't necessarily need to justify a trip by amount of time spent overseas, because what you're really getting back is a memory that you will be telling until you die. And those memory dividends, I think you can't put a price on. So I was very happy to see you kind of take that trip and see you on the ground as well. Let's jump into it. So, as you know very well, we start all of our episodes with some quick fire questions to help our listeners get to know you a bit better. So, the first one for you is, what inspired you to pursue a career in sport?
For me, look, I always loved sport as a kid, but I was just about to turn 10 when the Sydney Olympics were held. Grew up in Sydney, grew up 10 minutes away from Olympic Park, and until the World Cup has actually managed to get itself into that sort of realm, but it was the greatest 16 days of my life. I hear from adults about how great it was, the partying and all that. Obviously, I didn't get to experience that, but from a sporting perspective, I've never felt an atmosphere like that. The sport was incredible, and I just knew from then that I just wanted to be in sport.
And your first ever paid position in sport?
Was working in the car park at Rosehill Racecourse. I was one of those guys wearing a high vis vest, putting people into parking spots, and then a couple of weeks later, I started at what was then Telstra Stadium, is now a Core Stadium, so Stadium Australia, as an usher. So again, my first job was at McDonald's. My second job was Rosehill, and I've basically worked in sport ever since.
Incredible. And what study did you do?
So I went to Charles Sturt University and studied a Bachelor of Journalism, or a Bachelor of Communication Journalism, so majored in journalism, and also did 6 months of my degree over in Ireland at the University of Limerick. So that was a great degree. But Charles Sturt's degree, it's out at Bathurst. It's produced a lot of journalists that you will have seen over the years. There's even still an urban myth there that one of the residences has a big name on it, and it was painted apparently by Andrew Denton. So that's sort of the your ilk of people that have come through that degree.
Amazing. And shout out to all the Enough Rope listeners who are tuning into this podcast. What is one interview question that you enjoy answering?
Look, with the jobs I've had there are so many different questions that can be asked, because look, I've had a very wide range of jobs. But I think for the job I'm doing currently with Seven, I remember getting asked, how do you turn a large or a messy data set into a story? And I guess that's something that for me is really critical, because you can have all of these data points, but in the end, you're telling stories. That's the job of anyone in the media, is to tell a story. And so for me, being able to look at a random set of numbers and being able to deduce something from that is pretty critical. So I think being able to know how you can see something and visualize something, I think that's something that I always like to be able to answer, because I can go, okay, I can take a time that someone records, and you can tell a story, positive, negative, neutral, but there's always a story element there.
And if you could try somebody else's job in sport for one day, whose would it be and why?
Okay, this is quite a funny one, because I wrote a story when I was working in Hong Kong about this guy who, in Japan, horse racing is massive in Japan. And for those that don't know, I come from a horse racing background. So I remember being on the ground the first time I covered a race in Japan, which was in 2015. And there's a guy that they call, I can't remember the Japanese term, but he's the cherry picker man. He's the starter of the race in Japan. He goes up this little cherry picker before the start of a race, and he waves a red flag to indicate that the race is about to start, that the horses are about to load up. And it's done with all this fanfare. There's a trumpet fanfare there for him. And it was just it fascinated me the reception he got that I said I actually wrote a whole piece about how I would love to be him for a day. So I think I have to keep that as my answer.
This is a great one. Just out of interest, like what led you to that part of the world and Hong Kong as well?
Yeah. So look, for me, I'd always wanted to be an expat. I'd always wanted to live abroad. I'd actually set myself the goal when I left university that I wanted to get abroad, and I had said Hong Kong as well. By the time I was 30, um, for the record, I ended up graduating a couple of months after my 22nd birthday, and I moved to Hong Kong the day after my 23rd birthday. So definitely got there quicker than I expected. Look, my dad had lived abroad for most of my teens. He lived in Singapore. So I'd done a lot of travel into Asia. For me, I think it was just that I wanted to get that experience abroad. I really wanted to be able to understand what life was like elsewhere. And look, as I say, I come from that racing background. Racing is a massive thing in Hong Kong. It's quite intrinsically linked to the story of the city and the history of the city. So for me, that was always a goal. And as I say, got to achieve it very young in my career, which was great. But it also meant that I had to really re-evolve and reassess what my career would look like because I had a career plan in mind, and it came to fruition much quicker, and probably has made things in my 30s a little bit more difficult than I would have expected, which is great because it means then I have the opportunity to reinvent myself and to be able to look at what I really want to do.
When you say more difficult now in your 30s, what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, so I think I'd achieved what I wanted to achieve very young, and
And was that a
being able to.
specific role at a specific organization?
Well, I just wanted to move to Hong Kong. I wanted to be a journalist in Hong Kong racing, and so I moved across to be a racing reporter with the South China Morning Post. So the South China Morning Post is the largest English speaking newspaper, or English language newspaper in Hong Kong. Really, in Asia, it's sort of the English language portal into Asia, especially with its proximity to China. So for me to be able to go there and work, like months before I'd moved there, the South China Morning Post had broken a heap of stories about Edward Snowden and he went through Hong Kong on his way to going to Russia. So it had such an incredible reputation that to be able to go there and do that was phenomenal. But again, that was sort of in my roadmap that I had in my mind, and it wasn't something I'd written out, but I had a vision in my mind, and I always thought that by the time I was 30, that was where I'd be, and that would probably be where I was in my 30s. In the end, I'd moved back to Australia by the time I was 28. I still had ambitions, but then COVID obviously came along, and so I think that it's given me the opportunity again to be able to go, what do I want to achieve? And I'm young enough that I'm able to sort of reinvent myself, but it's also a challenge because the you're not the young person coming through. You're not the blank slate, I guess is the best way to put it. You're not someone who you've got all this experience, which is brilliant, but also are you now too pigeonholed, too niche to be able to then transition into other things? And I think that's something that within sport, and especially as you do get that experience behind you, you can very much be pigeonholed. So it's about trying to find how you can get out of that box that people can put you in. And I think I've been lucky enough in the last couple of years to be able to do that.
Well, that kind of feels like the juncture in which we came to know you. It was around this time last year, July 2025, that you applied for the SportsGrad Method Program, and at that point in time, I've still got the application on file here. Where it says like you'd applied for 50 odd jobs and only had 5 interviews, so operating around 10% cut through, and a call network of about 5 people at that point in time. But still, you kind of came to us with like this experience of racing Victoria, and you'd worked with Nine as a researcher for the Paris Olympics and Paralympics as well. But at that point in time, what did you feel like you had the biggest issue with in regard to your career? What was the main problem for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is still that very much that same thing of people seeing what you've done or who you are, and not being able to see how you can apply it in other ways. Especially for me in media, like I've been very, very lucky. I've managed to do a lot of different things across media. I've worked in newspapers, I've worked in television, I've worked in with digital platforms. I'm quite versatile, which I think if you're a media professional these days, you really need to be versatile. You need to be able to do so many different things. So I had all that, but because a lot of it had come in racing, there was very much a view that, which was expressed to me by people that I'd applied for jobs with, that it wasn't either directly transferable or they just couldn't see that I had interests other than that. And look, it was challenging, as you say. I still remember putting in that application. I still remember reaching out to you and realizing it wasn't necessarily that I was doing things wrong, but it was just needing to have a different perspective on how I could approach things. And I think that's the critical thing, is that it's not always that you're doing things wrong, or it's not always that things aren't there isn't always one way of doing things. And I think that was probably something that I fell into a trap of, is that I was trying the same thing over and over. It wasn't getting me anywhere. I needed to be able to look at things from a different perspective. And I think that was where SportsGrad was fantastic. And for me as well, it wasn't just about the method, which I think is like the method's brilliant, and I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to learn and discuss it. But I think it's the people I've been able to meet, and it's not. I've been very lucky to have a couple of great people that I've met through the program, who are high up in the industry. I've worked with Alex Brown at Rugby Australia. He's phenomenal. But what I think it is the other members within the program, especially a lot of the young guys coming through, because again, they've got different ways of looking at things, and so you might be able to just bounce ideas off and talk about, look, I'm wanting to try and pivot in this direction. What do you think? And again, it's just a different way of looking at things, and I think that's something that I've really, really appreciated.
Well, part of that application, you said, if I don't do it now, I'm going to be confined to racing forever. And when people come to us with regard to their job hunting, people usually have a problem with one of three core issues. And number one is like they don't have much of an online presence, and so the awareness of them as a professional can be small. A second one being like they don't have many relationships with people in sport, and so they're up against people who do get that preferential treatment. And then the third issue that they use is that people don't understand how to best sell themselves and articulate their value, and instead can tend to downplay their experience. With regard to any one of those three, is there one that you feel like you struggled with the most when you were job hunting?
Yeah. So look, I think I was lucky. I had an online presence across different platforms, and that was something that I'd been able to build out. But I think that, again, that was something that where I'd built my online presence was probably outdated in the way that I'd built it up years ago, and I hadn't really cultivated it in the way that I should have, or the way that I could have. So I think that was helpful. But I think for me, the networking part of it was so critical, and the reason being, I had great contacts within racing. I have brilliant contacts within racing. I'd spent years building those up. I am proud to have a network of people right around the world in racing. But in terms of outside of racing, I hadn't really spent the time building those up, and I think that saw me exposed very quickly. As you say, it's about who you know and how you can potentially make those contacts. And I think that I hadn't done enough to be able to build those relationships. Even if I met people, I don't think I've done enough at building the relationship to a point where they would be able to vouch for me. And I think that's something that, again, is a reminder that it took me back to when I was 16, 17, and I was wanting to go. I knew I wanted to go into racing media. That was just where I was at that time, and I was contacting everyone. I was introducing myself to everyone, and I had sort of lost that because, again, I'd got to where I needed to. I'd made those relationships, and I think that was a reminder that it's not something that it's not a static process. It's something that you have to keep building, and you have to keep cultivating. And I think that was a good wake up call for me that I needed, and I've been very grateful for that.
Well, you're now at Com Games now as a researcher for Channel 7's coverage of the Com Games, and I was chatting with Dave Colbert before, who your research is kind of feeding into what he goes on air and shares with the public, which is awesome to be able to kind of share his side and your side and how they kind of match together. But the way that this role came about was started with a bit of a post, I believe. Because I remember on School, which we use School as our community platform in the program, you posted on there one day saying one post using the headhunted system, which is one of the playbooks in the method, is all it took to catch the attention of someone who you had admired for years and would love to have as a mentor. They reached out to you in the end, and that relationship then helped when you're applying for the job. Can you talk us about how that all kind of connected together?
Absolutely. So I've done research for Nine with the Paris Olympics and Paralympics, and also Milano Cortina. Nine has a senior researcher who's there full time, Brett Graham, fantastic operator. But on the back of last year's World Athletics Championships, which the viewing numbers were extraordinary. I never thought I'd see World Athletics Championships getting 3 million viewers because it just was something that was quite, it was in the middle of an Olympic cycle or a Commonwealth Games cycle, but people were just tuning in. We've got a very exciting group of athletes at the moment, many of whom will be on show in Glasgow over the next couple of weeks. But I wrote a post just being able to highlight that Com Games was coming up in 9 months, and we're seeing these athletes coming through. Everyone knows Gout. He's not at the Com Games and is now injured and out for the season. But Lockie Kennedy, Eddie Nketiah, who wasn't there at the time but is there now. Tori Lewis, Jess Hull, Claudia Hollingsworth. I mean, it's an incredible team. Cam Myers, they're incredible, an incredible track team. And so I'd put up a post about this, and not only did I get Athletics Australia's CEO Jane Fleming, who herself was an incredible athlete, incredible heptathlete back in the day. She reached out, but a couple of people at Seven reached out as well, just saying how much they really appreciated it, and how much they thought that I clearly knew what I was talking about, including Josh Kay, who's the researcher at Seven. He's their main researcher. He's not working on the Com Games because he's focused on footy at the moment, but he reached out, and from there, it ended up leading to conversations and introductions that ended up getting me into this role as the senior researcher for the Com Games. So again, it is amazing how just being able to show your knowledge and being able to show what you know, being able to show your interest and your intent can really lead you to making connections that you never know where they're going to lead.
Incredible, mate. Well, it is such a great story and example of how these relatively simple things, but when done well, can lead to extraordinary results. But yet still many people don't take those steps to put themselves out there or build an online presence or to make those connections as well, which ultimately so much of the success in job hunting comes down to. But let's talk about what you're working on at the moment, because you're a busy man right now. What does the day in the life of a senior researcher for Channel 7's coverage of the Com Games look like at this minute?
Well, at this minute, today is actually the day where we go from. So I'm based in Sydney for these games. There is a team over in Glasgow, but our research team is based out of Sydney. And today's the day, which is the Tuesday before the opening ceremony is Thursday night, Glasgow time, Friday morning, Australian time. Today's the day where we go from day sessions to night sessions. So I'll start working nights from tonight, and I'll work overnights. So it actually fits in well to be able to do a podcast today when I'm still awake during the days. But look, it's a lot of different little things, and I think it's a lot of it's about being a troubleshooter. We've done a lot of the information already. So over the last couple of months, I've been preparing biographies on every Australian athlete, previews of every sport, how the rules work, the venues, the para classifications. The Commonwealth Games is different to the Olympic Games in that para athletics and para swimming and para cycling run at the same time. That they run alongside swimming, cycling, athletics, and so they're contained within the same program. So being able to educate commentators about para classifications and the different teams. I mean, obviously your teams that you have here, your Australia, Canada, England and Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, they all compete separately here compared to an Olympic Games where they compete as Great Britain. And then you've also got your strange little teams like Norfolk Island and the Falkland Islands and little countries or territories that don't compete in an Olympics. So putting together profiles about them and their athletes. So a lot of that work has been done already, and now it's about basically being a troubleshooter, being there to answer questions when they come up, being able to really help producers, presenters, hosts, studio crew, whoever needs to know something, just being able to answer questions and being able to help them to know where to find the answers. So, as I say, most of the research stuff's done. Now it's really about being a troubleshooter and being there to be able to help where you can.
So you have been part of the team since March, which is like a 5-month lead-in period before the games even start. And so you mentioned all the buyers and games sort of descriptions, etc. When you're getting started out, what does the process look like to even come up with like a research strategy? Is that even a thing that Channel 7 concocts, be like, this is the way we're going to approach the next few months, and these are kind of the outputs we want you guys to go ahead and build, so that when your Dave Colberts and your Bruce McAvaneys of the world kind of get on air, they've got that body of work behind them? How does that sort of initial skeleton framework begin?
Yeah, good question. Look, with this project in particular, we had an end goal of what we wanted to achieve, and it was about trying to map out how we were going to get there. So I knew the documents I wanted to produce. I knew what we wanted to have as sort of the set of Bibles that people could rely on. And then it was just about being able to figure out, okay, when can we deliver? A lot of it revolved around when teams were going to be announced. Often we wouldn't know in advance who was going to be in the team, or we got a very short lead in to know who was going to be there. For instance, athletics, I knew, I think 48 hours before they announced the team who was going to be there. You could figure people out, but you still had to wait until the official announcement before you could really start building things properly. And so, look, it's been a process. For me, with this with the Com Games, as you said, I started in March. I sort of sketched out what I wanted to achieve. We sat down with a few of the big star athletes in April. So if you watch Seven's coverage of the Commonwealth Games, you'll see interviews with quite a few of the big names, and they were all conducted over 2 days in April. Also, if you've seen any of the ads and they're in their uniforms or they're waving the flags or whatever, that was all done in April. And so that was a chance to sit down and chat with them. Some chats were really quick because they were moving from station to station and doing things. Some people arrived early, so I got to have really long chats with them. Sam Short, who's one of our leading swimmers, I got to have a long chat to him. Lani Pallister, I had a long chat to. Sam Williamson, really long chat to. And so, it just sort of built from there. And then I guess it was a case of just feeling your way. You don't necessarily know what talent are going to want and when. I still remember the day I got my first phone call from Bruce saying what he needed, and it was a little bit of he needed it pretty quickly to be able to do some interviews, and there's a bit of panic that comes there because you want to ensure that Bruce has the best information available. But Bruce is an incredible professional. He knows most of it anyway. He just wants it as a safety jacket. And so that's sort of how it played out. It was just sort of, as I say, you have an idea what you want to achieve. You know what you're going to, you finally achieve it. It's just how it goes from there. In between, it's not a straightforward path.
We're of course talking about the great Bruce McAvaney. How did it feel knowing that you're going to work with him? And was there an introduction to Bruce, or did he just have your number and go, "Hey Andrew, thanks, glad you work with me. By the way, need this stat." Like, what was your relationship with Bruce like?
Well, the funny thing is that Bruce, I mentioned earlier about contacting a heap of people when I was 16 and 17. I think I was a little bit older. I think I'd started uni, so I would have been 19 when I sent Bruce a message saying, "Look, do you have any advice for someone who wants to get into sports media?" And I actually missed the call from Bruce.
How did you send him this message?
Snail mail going back in the day. So I mean, not back in the day that far. It was what, 16 years ago. But I sent him a typed letter. Sent it to Channel 7 in Melbourne, and I missed a call from him. I was abroad. I was visiting my dad in Singapore and didn't get the call. But I got back to my apartment in Bathurst, and I one day had this handwritten letter from Bruce, and it was on a very sort of small strip of paper, handwritten letter over two sides, and it was so gentlemanly. It was phenomenal. He didn't have to do that. I was a nobody. I was a first year at university, and it was it was just, it wasn't even so much the content of what he said. I mean, the content was very much, just get as much experience as you can. It was very much sort of SportsGrad method, really, in simplistic terms. But it was the fact that he was humble enough to be able to respond and do what he could to respond that really meant a lot. Now, Bruce and I hadn't come across Bruce since. I mean, we'd crossed paths, sort of, we like ships in the night, especially in racing. He does quite a bit of racing work, and I'd been in the same vicinity as him, but we'd never actually worked together. And then I got introduced to him by the head of the Commonwealth Games, Anna Stone, a couple of months ago. She just sent a message to him saying, "Look, if you need anything, just give Andrew a call." Got a call from Bruce, and we spent actually probably 45 minutes just talking, and not so much talking about what he needed or anything like that, just being able to talk and talk about our great memories, and me talking to him about some of his great moments. It wasn't a work-based call. It was much more a personal call. And as I say, I can't speak highly enough of Bruce. Just an absolute gentleman, knows his stuff like you wouldn't believe, and is so determined to get it right. And like there have been so few storytellers like him. He can sum up a race, sum up an event so well. It's a privilege to be able to work with him, and I cannot speak highly enough of Bruce, and to be able to watch him in action over the coming days is going to be phenomenal.
That's an incredible story, and like what a full circle moment for yourself too, to be able to reach out to your hero and then 16 years later be on the receiving end of a phone call as colleagues. Did he remember your letter by any chance?
Look, I don't know. I can't tell. I did bring it up. Look, I can't tell whether he remembered, but the thing is that he acknowledged that he acknowledged that he'd known who I was for a while, and had followed what I'd done. And as I say, whether he remembered or not, it felt like he did remember, and he made me feel like I belonged. And I think that's something that, again, for someone who's been there, done that, he's been basically the face of the Olympics, the face of sport in Australia for 5 decades, and to know that someone respects you enough to be like that, that's as I say, I can't speak highly enough of him at all.
It's incredible hearing the amount of Bruce stories from people whose careers have been accelerated by him, whether it be front-facing people like your Hamish McLaughlin's, or researchers behind the scenes such as yourself. I'd love to see an event where all the people who have worked with Bruce come together, and they've all got their own story of how he's had an impact on them. But I do want to ask more about your the research that you do, because you mentioned you worked on Paris 2024, and I'm guessing that a lot of athletes have probably carried over from those games into these games. And yes, they're different broadcasters. Paris was Channel 9, Com Games is Channel 7. But a large body of the work will be somewhat similar, but an update of 2 years or so. With this sort of research, do broadcasters ever work together to be like, hey, here's like our mountain of archives that you guys can build upon, and we'll just handball it to you just to make your life easier? Do people keep it to themselves, or is this something you keep personally to carry with you, so you're not starting from a blank slate in the future, which then again kind of makes you more valuable? For example, like if you wanted to put your hand up and be a researcher for LA 2028, you're coming in from the point of view where you'd be like, I've already done the research on 24 and 26 com games. Like, I've got 80% of the knowledge already in my head. Let me just do a couple more years and we're ready to go. How does that archive of knowledge get passed around and get used?
Yeah, a lot of the researchers are freelancers or contractors, so it means that they are used in that way. They've got their body of knowledge already and their body of work already that they're able to take to people. As I say, Nine has a researcher in place full time, that being Brett Graham. So does Seven. Josh Kay is Sevens, but Josh Kay, again, he's doing footy, and obviously, in the run up to finals, it's quite critical for him to be across footy. So that's why they bring people in from outside, especially for these major, these sort of one-off events. Obviously the Olympics is every 2 years, if you include the winters, and the Com Games every 4 years. So it's a bit different, as opposed to having someone who's on it all year, all 4 years around or across the whole cycle. And so they bring in people who generally have that knowledge. And look, they've done it like that for a while. 7 and 9 both have used researchers who have done that before. And there's quite a few names that people who've been in that research space would know. People like David Clark, Ray Mason, Steve Samuelson. They've been doing it for years and years. The athletics researcher for the Com Games and also for Paris 2024 is a guy called Christian Brenchley, who's actually Bruce's second cousin, but has done quite a bit otherwise. And so, look, it's about bringing together people that already have that knowledge. But you're right; it is a case of there being a bank of knowledge already and a bank of information already. The thing is, it can be critical to be able to ensure it's updated. One story I can tell is that when I was in Brisbane in April, the swimmers had just had the Australian Open Championships, so it was sort of their pre-trials hit out up there, and so we managed to get a lot of the swimmers in one place. And there was one swimmer who's on the team. I won't name them, but I was sitting down with them and I was asking them about their relationship. Again, it's just something, we have personal details about them all, about their parents' names, their siblings, where they were born, where they live, their partner, their children, just things that it might be critical if someone's doing an interview with them. And so I was speaking to this athlete, this swimmer, about their relationship, and they told me, I'm sorry, we actually broke up last week, and they were clearly still quite distraught about it. And look, it was an awkward moment for me, but I also said to them, look, I'm glad that we've had this conversation now, because it means that if someone was to interview you after you win gold, it won't be an awkward conversation that happens in front of millions of people. It's happened between you and I, and no one else is here. And they were appreciative about that. So, look, things do change. There are certain things that will always be the same, but there are certain things that change. And look, with the Com Games as well, there's events that don't happen at the Olympics. Things like I've had to learn about bowls quite quickly, which I didn't know much about. And it's different again from previous games, because it's not on grass, it's actually on carpet indoors, which has never been done before. I've had to learn about netball pretty quickly, which I knew a little bit about, but again, things that just aren't there with the Olympics. So you're still learning and you're still having to do different things, even if you're not, even if you do have, things like your swimmers, your athletes, you've got quite a bit of knowledge there already.
What sort of role has AI played in your research? Because I can see how transformative it would be in speeding up the process and being able to cross-reference things, particularly with the way that you can build a Claude project these days pretty quickly. But before this chat, I was chatting with Dave Colbert, and he's got his very physical Claude projects, which are literally physical binders this big, where he's gone and done his own work on his computer, printed it out, annotated it. It's all very analog, which is fine because he's been doing it for 30 years and that's his way. But we're kind of in a day and age where all that knowledge can kind of be stacked inside an LLM and used to be sifted through very quickly. Has AI been introduced into your role at all?
It has, and I think it's only going to increase from there. Look, it's not something that you use, like you wouldn't go say to ChatGPT and say, give me a profile on an athlete, because there is a lot of erroneous information out there. But once you've managed to build a data set, and you go from there, then you can use it to be able to potentially ask questions of it, and then use that data set to be able to bring it together. So in terms of building data, I still think it's at a point where I wouldn't touch it personally. You might use it to potentially scrape everything that's there about the athlete or about something, but again, I've had people coming to me with questions and going, I've ChatGPT says this, and the answer is actually something completely different. So, I think at the moment, as I say, it's definitely playing a part, and I can only see that accelerating. I think that there's always going to be a need, though, to ensure that information's accurate, and that's where there is always going to be a human, or at least for the foreseeable future, there's always going to be a human element there to ensure that the information is as accurate as possible. And I think the importance of getting information right here is not just for a better viewing experience for the audience, but it's also showing the respect to athletes and to tell their stories effectively, especially with something like the Com Games, where you've got a lot of athletes from. We were going through yesterday some of the athletes from some of the smaller territories who they may never get coverage in a place like Australia or the UK or Canada, and they're going to be like we were talking about. Because Ariane Titmus might have a chat to them if they're poolside, because she's going to be on the poolside on the pool deck there in Glasgow, and they might get that exposure. But the thing is, if you were to go to ChatGPT and there's absolutely no information there, it's probably going to pull up something inaccurate. Or if you were to go to Claude, or if you go to Grok or whatever it is, So I think, as I say, it's definitely played a part in terms of being able to bring data together and to be able to ask questions and to be able to potentially analyze data in a different way to what you might think straight away. But in terms of actually producing data, it's not at a point yet where I feel it's reliable enough to be verified.
Yep, you're still at your best, safest going out and having those physical conversations with the athlete.
100%. 100%. And the thing is too, I think that people. There are data points that are pulled in that are out of date or just plainly wrong. There's been for example, I can give one example where Lockie Kennedy. I remember talking to him up in he was in Sydney. We had a chat to him after the Australian Championships, and it was talking about him being born in Australia, for instance. And no, he was actually born in the UK and came to Australia when he was young. So like a simple thing like that, where it could easily get into the system, and then there's a completely different story being told. Another one was Eleanor Patterson, who's one of our high jumpers. Everywhere it's reported that her coach Marco is her fiance. And I brought it up with her, and she goes, no, he's not my fiance. We're not engaged. But the Italian for fiance is the same as the Italian for girlfriend. And so, that's where the confusion comes from. And she said she even got a call from her grandmother asking, oh, when did you get engaged? And she's like, we're not engaged. We're not engaged. So it's things like that it's still at a point where it can't tell the difference between the information that's fed into it and what's right and what's wrong. So again, having those conversations is still so important.
And the AI influence, is that something that, Channel 9 in the past and Channel 7 now, are they talking to you about how to best use, or is this something that you are doing personally in your own time as your way of being the professional that you are?
Look, it's something that has been discussed, but it hasn't been discussed with me personally. I think that there's sort of an understanding that you're there as a human, influence in that. It's not, and I think they know how that's not the way that I would ever engage AI. I think that's just something that it sort of has gone unspoken. But again, I know that it is something that is discussed with right across the media profession these days. It's something that it's an issue being grappled with, and it's something that is becoming more profound and more critical as AI really does accelerate. I mean, there are times now that I struggle to tell the difference between something that's been AI written and something that's been written by a journalist I know. And usually I can tell the difference. There's certain giveaways and certain telltale signs, but it is definitely something that the gap between what is AI written and what is human written is closing at a rate of knots. And so, I think it's about responsible usage. And as I say, I haven't had those conversations yet, but I think that's because there's that unwritten and unspoken rule. But yeah, I think it's something that is going to be a conversation that's had across the board, in whatever way you're involved.
100%. I mean, who knows? We might not be too far away from a world whereby, all these stacks of data sets that have been built by people like yourself who've gone out to have the conversations get pulled into some sort of engine that can then get plugged into a particular broadcaster that can now tap into this literally digital encyclopedia of knowledge and speed up the process very, very quickly. But as you say, where that input comes from is going to be absolutely critical to making sure no one makes a fool of themselves on air.
And the thing too is, I think that there's always going to need to then be someone who can drive that. So the roles that I'm doing, I don't see them being made obsolete. It may just adapt, and it may be about okay, if there is that data set, how do you drive it to best be able to provide the information you need? How do you give assurance to the people that are telling these stories that the answers you're giving them are accurate? And I think that's really so. I can see that AI will be a part of it, and look, it is something that I've thought. Does that make the wide array of jobs I've done? Does AI potentially threaten the experience that I've had? And I don't think it does. It's just about being able to adapt and being able to then engage it to be able to be to be able to assist in the roles I do rather than replacing the roles I've done.
100%. I want to change tack slightly and bring up a name that you mentioned before, Alex Brown, now at Rugby Australia, I believe, as the Chief of Corporate Affairs. Also used to be the Chief Editor at Code Sports and was Head of Communications at Cricket Australia before that. One thing that he's mentioned to me in the conversations we've had is that in this day and age, to have a successful career in media journalism, you do have to be what he calls a digital all-rounder and be a bit of a Swiss Army knife for skills that allow you to create and publish stuff online or contribute to a publication in any way, shape or form. How have you found your, I guess, what direction have you noticed that you've had to steer your skill set development towards as time has gone on, particularly in like the last 5 years, whether it be in relation to writing or editing video, or even working with the back end of websites to upload stuff or content creation? Where have you noticed the upskilling of yourself go towards?
Well, it's really interesting because even when I started at the South China Morning Post, so we're talking 13 years ago now, it was very much a print first model. Digital was second. But I was hired both as a reporter, but also as a sub editor. So I was laying out pages. I was writing captions. I was writing headlines. Being able to do all that. And very quickly after that, within sort of that 5 years at the end of the 2010s, subbing jobs have basically disappeared. They still exist, but you might have one sub. Whereas my dad was a journalist. When he was there, there would have been as many subs as there were journalists, if not more. Everything was being checked over again and again. So I think that comes back to being an all rounder. It really takes in every version of media these days. You need to be able to do everything. These days it's not just being able to be able to write. Like my dad would have just been able to write copy, and that was it. He would be chasing stories. He'd be writing or calling stories in. But that was all he had to do. Whereas for me, I have to be able to write. I have to be able to use Photoshop. I have to be able to use CMSs, whatever they are, and there are a wide array. So I'm very proficient in WordPress, but I know how to use a whole array of other CMSs, whichever version they use.
For those unaware of the acronym, CMS stands for Content Management System, which is basically
content management system,
a website where people upload photos and text that form a website. So.
Yes, sorry, I forget. It's become such a thing that you forget that people like that. It is, it is sort of an acronym that people use. So yes, content management systems. As I said, Photoshop, Premiere Pro. I have to know how to be able to video edit. I have to know how to shoot and edit. And have to be able to understand all the different things there. I've used I used InDesign to be able to lay out a couple of the things I did for Seven for the country profiles. I've had to be able to use After Effects to be able to do things in 3D. You'd have to be able to really do every element of the media role to be able to survive in media these days. And that's whether you're a journalist, whether you're a reporter, whether you're a video editor, whether you're an agency rep, or whether you're a corporate comms manager. You just have to be able to do everything, because you never know when you might need to be able to step up into those positions, and there aren't that many people that are able to fit all those roles. So look, it is valuable to be able to use all those tools to an extent, but it can be quite difficult to become proficient in, or even to become adept at being able to use so many different tools. Like I wouldn't say that I'm any sort of great pro at using After Effects, for instance, but I'd say that I'd say I'm a pro at WordPress, or I'm a pro at Premiere Pro and video editing. So it's just about being able to get your skills together and being able to do as many things as possible so that you can fill as many gaps as possible.
I think Alex might have to go and trademark that term, because everyone seems to be pushing their career in that direction.
I think, do you know what? It's funny when you said it. It was because I've had coffee with Alex quite a few times, so I got matched with him through the SportsGrad program, and have caught up with him. Brilliant insight. He's done so many different things across media, and as you say, now corporate affairs at Rugby Australia. But I just had his voice in my mind when you're saying, digital around a Swiss Army knife. He said both those things frequently, and it's so true though. It is so accurate, because you do have to be able to you have to be a jack of all trades. You have to be able to do everything if you want to be able to survive and to be able to progress through the media landscape these days.
Before we wrap up, I want to play a little game with you. And if you could take yourself back probably 10 years, and you're trying to break into sports media for the first time. And if someone said to you, Andrew, I'm going to give you $1 million if you can land a job in sport in the next 30 days. What would you do in those 30 days?
Oh, good question. Well, I mean, I think the first thing I'd do is try to meet as many people as possible. To just reach out cold. Find the people that you want to be, and just reach out. And look, not everyone's going to return that contact. And I think that's the thing that I probably struggled with, was like, I don't want to really. I don't want to. It's almost rejection, not hearing back, but it's not rejection. That people are busy. People get caught up in other things. What I found is that so many people are willing to help, and want to help you out. That if you reach out and reach out respectfully and appropriately, there's no reason that they don't want to help you. And so I think that's the first thing I'd do, is just go and try and meet as many people as possible.
If $1 million is on the line, how many messages a day are we talking?
Oh, I'd be sending messages constantly throughout the day. I wouldn't stop. I'd reach out to anyone on the periphery. I'd reach out. You just never know who knows who. And I think that's something that I've figured out since is everyone knows someone that can help you out. Everyone has contacts. Everyone has, you may not think that they're relevant, but they are, everyone has a path to play. And I think the thing too is the one lesson I've learned is that people love talking about themselves. And that sounds really conceited, and I don't mean it that way, but people love to be able to prove that they know people. People love to be able to help. People want to be able to help for the most part. Not everyone, but most people love to know that they've been able to help. I know I've helped people out, and it gives me a great thrill to be able to go, I can introduce you to this person and make a connection, and they can take it from there. And so I think that realizing that and realizing how much people love to be able to show how much they know and show what they know and show who they know. You message people constantly. Message people. If they don't respond, don't take it as rejection. That's something I've had to learn. That's probably been the biggest lesson I've learned. But look, I think that's the thing is make as many contacts as you can. And look, if it doesn't lead anywhere, it doesn't lead anywhere. But there's that chance that it will, and you will be forever grateful that you made that one message, that you see you had that one coffee, you had that one phone call. And you just, as I say, you never know where it will lead. And I think the other thing too, is that $1 million on the line, I wouldn't say no to anything. And by that, I mean that, there are always opportunities on the line. There are always people are always willing to make connections. People are always willing to meet up. As I say, not everyone, but there are people, there's so many people are willing to meet up. Don't hold yourself back. You never know where that might lead. So don't, get into a yes mindset instead of a no mindset, I guess. Get into a glass half full mentality, and you never know where that will lead.
We chatted with James Clark, who came through the program and landed a commercial partnerships job at the Brisbane Bullets recently, and he mentioned that he was sending about 10 messages a day to people. And I think if you really wanted to make a sure thing of it and pick up $1 million in the way, you'd probably 5x that at a minimum.
100%.
Just increase your surface area.
And that's it. The thing is that you can, look, as I say, you might reach out to people who you think they're on the periphery of what I want to do. They're not directly relevant, and they may not be, but they are likely to know someone who will be. They're likely to be. Yeah, that's one thing I think I found through this role with Seven at the moment. The number of people I'm dealing with who know other people who I've worked with, who, it's a large industry sport, but it's also a very small industry. A lot of people know one another. There's the whole thing about 6 degrees of separation in sport. I found it's probably 2 degrees of separation to be able to meet people. So I think, as I say, you may not think that one message might help, but you never know where it might lead. They might know someone who knows the person that is your dream mentor, your dream job. It could be right there, and that's where, as you say, if $1 million on the line, no, definitely increasing that. We're looking at if you have a template to work off, you're probably going triple figures if you can, because it is something that look, again, I'm personally like tailoring messages to people. I don't like sort of sending templated messages, but if you are, there's always sort of the same basis that you're working off. So you can actually send a lot more messages than you'd think.
Well, swap $1 million for a decades-long career in sport, and the stakes are still pretty high, regardless of whether there's a game surrounding your context or not.
100%, and that's the thing. I think if you want it, it is there. It's just about figuring out how to make it happen, and it's not going to be a straightforward path. I think I've proven myself that things are never straightforward, but they are. There is always a path to get somewhere where you want. And look, I mean, my path is still not straightforward. I don't know necessarily where my path is going in the future, but I'm very excited about what the future holds. I don't know what that is, but I know that I know that through the people I've met, through the experiences I've had, that I've got an exciting future ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've done a terrific job of going all in on yourself from day dot to build the career that you've got. But Had you not pursued a career in sport and backed yourself, what do you think life would look like? Is there a job that you think you might have fallen into that you've been able to avoid because of this chosen path?
Yeah, look, I'm not sure. I think the thing is that I probably want to do everything, and so I could have ended up in anything. I've got some very random interests outside of sport. I've always loved politics. I've always loved elections. I could have done something in that sort of space, but I don't know if anyone would really want to be in politics these days, would they? But I could have ended up anywhere. But the thing is that sport, like in my mind, it was never a question. Like it's just sport was there, and if it was there, that was where I wanted to be. And I guess I never really considered the prospect that if I wanted it and that was where I wanted to be, that I was never going to be anywhere else.
And biggest pinch me moment that you've had in your sports career so far?
You know what? I've had quite a few. I think the biggest one for me was during the Milan Cortina Olympics just gone, and I'm sitting in a commentary booth with Steve Bradbury. It was the anniversary of his famous gold medal win, where everyone fell in front of him and he's come across and won gold, the first Winter Olympic gold for Australia. And and we're just sitting there having a drink, having a chat, and it was just him and I. And that made me realize, wow, I was the kid watching him and thinking, I'd love to work in media one day and cover that and be a part of that. And here I am sitting next to him, and it was just that to me was a pinch me moment. That was where I go, wow, look how far I've come.
That's awesome. What is Stephen Bradbury up to these days? So they just roll him out when the Winter Olympics are on for commentary, and I'm guessing he does a few speaking gigs in between to inspire people to see what you could become if you just take a chance. Like, what's he doing?
That's basically it. He was saying, actually, when he was doing the commentary, because he was doing commentary in Sydney. Again, he was meant to go to Milan, but there was the broadcast commentary positions at the speed skating weren't great, so he ended up coming and just doing it from Sydney. But he ended up there were a couple of times during that where he'd fly up to the Gold Coast for the day. He was calling overnight, but then flying up to the Gold Coast for the day to do speeches and then come back. So, I mean, look, a pretty lucrative gig for him. People love hearing from him. I saw him on an ad the other day. I saw he's on an ad for something. But he's doing some stuff in speed skating as well. He has his own beer line as well, or a beer range called Last Man Standing, appropriately enough. And look, he's a great guy. Some of the stories he can tell. For people that know Sydney, he was a world champion in Sydney, and he won his world championship at Macquarie Centre, which is a shopping centre that has an ice rink in it. I used to go to school near there. We'd go to the food court and look into the ice skating rink. It was a pretty drab ice skating rink. To think that there was actually a world championship there would be like, I don't know. Imagine being, for those in Melbourne, being at like, I'm trying to think of a big. What's the big Westfield in Melbourne?
Doncaster.
Yeah, Doncaster. Being at like Westfield, Doncaster, and seeing sort of like seeing a ice skating rink there, and there was a world championship there. It's just bizarre, but that was his world championship, and I was just thinking, like, that was an extraordinary story to hear. But the stories he could tell, absolutely phenomenal, and a really great guy. So that was definitely a pinch me moment.
Amazing. That's a super cool story. Andrew, thanks so much for jumping on the podcast, and it's a pleasure to have you inside the SportsGrad Method Program, not only to be able to kind of help you through your journey, but to see you hang around and help others as well come through too. It's been a joy to witness, and wishing you all the best with your research and delivery of the Com Games coverage.
Thanks, Ruben, and hopefully appear on here again soon.
Absolutely.